Europe burns, the New World has finally come to rescue the old. After victories in North Africa and Italy, the Allies are bringing the full might of the U.S. Army to Europe, intent on ending the threat of Nazism once and for all. With the Allies invading from the west and the Red Army pushing from the east, the German army is caught between a rock and a hard place. But the cornered enemy is always the most dangerous one. You will take the role of Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower, and although the war is in its last stages, you will have your hands full. The desperate Germans still have plenty of tricks up their sleeves. Generals Montgomery and Patton are at each other's throats. The Soviets have their own agenda, and back in America, a terrible new weapon is being developed, bound to change the course of history. Keep your faith staunch and your arms resolute. Great battles lie ahead. Godspeed, General Eisenhower.
Montgomery, what is the meaning of this? It took you 6 weeks to capture Caen. By that time, Bradley's forces had already breached the enemy lines and pushed inland.
Quite so. It was my generalship that made Bradley's breakthrough possible. I drew the German panzer divisions away from Bradley and demolished them.
General, our plan was for a massive, simultaneous advance. You were supposed to capture Caen on D-Day.
It was too well fortified for a tidy victory. Instead of wasting my men, I got Caen at a minimal cost. I knew what I was doing the whole time, I assure you.
That's the goddamn problem, Montgomery. You knew. And nobody else. An army is a team.
Managing our joint forces is not an easy task, Montgomery. Do not complicate it by your improvisation.
General Eisenhower, I fought the Hun out in the field since 1939. And you haven't been in a battle once. You're in no position to school me.
Monty, you watch your damn mouth. Don't forget who you're talking to.
Don't worry, George. Montgomery, be that as it may, I am the Supreme Allied Commander. And we have a chain of command.
Without a doubt, your logistical and organizing talents are admirable. I'll have a good use for them when I'm promoted to Field Marshal.
Congratulations on your promotion, Field Marshal Montgomery.
Why, thank you. I have done quite a bit of real soldiering in my life. Naturally, 5 stars reflect that better than 4.
Prime Minister Churchill seems to think so. But down to business. We must take the Ruhr industrial area from the Germans. Any thoughts?
My staff and I have a plan for a surprise offensive. We'll capture the main bridges and cross the Rhine River. The paratroopers will lead the charge on this one.
A bold plan. The gains could be enormous, but the risks are high.
Give me full control of the operation and I'll negate those risks. One hard push in the north will open the road to Berlin.
Berlin, of course, is the main prize. Field Marshal, I can't give you full control over all Allied resources, but I will give your army groups supply priority.
Splendid. That is all I need.
I will also transfer the Paratrooper Corps to your command. But Montgomery, you must act only when you're absolutely sure of success. Let's leave the gambling at the poker table. Montgomery, I gave you carte blanche on this one. So where is your decisive victory?
Our operation was 90% successful. We pushed deeply into Holland and forced Jerry well onto his back foot. If you hadn't ordered that we stop the offensive...
Montgomery, you dropped lightly armed paratroopers onto a pair of panzer divisions.
We lost 3 times the Nazi casualties. This can't continue.
From this point on, our forces must advance simultaneously, on a broad front. No more gambling.
You cannot possibly blame me. I used the intelligence your headquarters gave me. How did they miss those panzer units?
Monty, this is pathetic. Be a man and admit you were wrong.
You stay out of this. When I need some injured soldiers slapped around, I'll ask your opinion.
Why, you lousy pipsqueak?
That's enough. The both of you. We failed because we overestimated ourselves and underestimated the enemy. And neither shall happen again.
Couldn't agree more, Ike. So what's our next move?
No more razzle-dazzle football. We have to build up our reserves and level out the front line. So much for leveling out the front line. The Germans hit us in the Ardennes, where our defenses were the weakest.
They have 2 panzer armies and they've broken through. Bastogne is encircled. They're hitting us with everything they've got.
Gotta hand it to them. Damned Krauts know shock tactics. Our boys on the ground are demoralized.
They won't be demoralized a day longer if I assume the command. The situation being what it is, I must say I am the man for the job.
There it is again. Monty's famous modesty.
Here's what we'll do. Patton, you take your army in the south and attack the belly of that salient. Montgomery, you lead the advance from the north. Understood?
Yes, sir.
This isn't a disaster. It's an opportunity. We have more than enough resources to beat the Germans back. But our boys at Bastogne have to hold out a little longer.
I am getting confusing reports. Some say General Montgomery has been hard for you to rein in.
While others say he has reined in too much. Monty tells me you won't let him command effectively.
The fact is the combined Allied forces are simply too large for any single commander to be prioritized. Bradley and Patton are every bit as important.
The reason I bring this up is the Russian bear grows hungrier. It would be prudent for us to capture Berlin ahead of the Red Army. And no one but Montgomery is willing to try.
Sir Winston, before we talk about Berlin, we must resupply and regroup. We can't consider any drastic maneuvers before we get our logistics in order.
Stalin cannot be trusted. He means to export Bolshevism across Europe at the point of a gun, and he has already conquered half the continent. Either we take Berlin ahead of the Russians, or Stalin will have a foothold to conquer all of Europe. We free democracies cannot allow that.
But if we take Berlin, we provoke the Soviet Union. And how is that in American interest? Besides, without the Soviets on board, we'll have no say about how post-war Europe will look.
You must agree that the further east we'll meet the Russians, the better. I insist that we speed up our advance. We can decide on Berlin later.
Agreed. But when that time comes, I will defer to General Eisenhower's judgment.
Churchill and Roosevelt have instructed me to launch our offensive as soon as possible. Field Marshal Montgomery, you'll lead our main effort across the Rhine River north of the Ruhr.
Hold on just a goddamn minute. Don't you know what he told the newspapers?
The truth and nothing but the truth.
Monty took all the credit for the Battle of the Bulge. Said the Americans fought so well because he led them.
That's the problem with you, Monty. When you make a mistake, the blame is always on somebody else. And even when you do your job well, you can't help being an ass about it.
At ease, George. Montgomery's leadership during the operation was superb. That much you have to admit.
Finally, some recognition.
But you did move slowly. That much is also true.
I was facing by far the worst odds.
The Germans brought 400,000 troops with them. Nobody's odds were good.
You tell him, Ike.
General Montgomery, in the upcoming operation, you will command the Commonwealth troops, because I can't imagine a single American accepting your command after that interview.
Is crushed. We have taken 50,000 prisoners, and our troops are 200 miles away from Berlin. The time is right to take the German capital.
Berlin is a death trap. The Germans are massing their remaining forces around the city.
But all their defenses are in the east against the Soviets. The road to Berlin is wide open.
Approaching the city is not the hard part. Inside Berlin, there will be death on every corner. The Germans are arming their civilians, and they will fight to the death.
Against Soviets, perhaps, but against us?
That's another part of the problem. If we snatch Berlin from under Stalin's nose, there could be hell to pay.
Politics. It's a diplomat's job to think about politics. A general's job is to win victories. You are making a decision we will all regret.
General Eisenhower, I insist that the Allies take Berlin without delay.
I refuse. We estimate storming the city will cost us 100,000 casualties. At the end of the European War, what could be worth that?
100,000? That can't be right. By all reports, the Germans have quit fighting us.
That's outside Berlin. Inside, Nazi fanatics will fight us house to house. Tens of thousands of our soldiers will die needlessly. I won't allow it. Can you believe it, George? The war is almost over. We've won.
Never doubted it for a moment. Americans play to win all the time. I just wish I could lead my boys into Berlin. That would have been a hell of a finale.
It would have been a bloodbath, George. The Reich is on its last legs. Let the Soviets have the final blow. Your boys miss out on Berlin, but they come home with their lives. We owe them that.
You're right, of course. My boys sure want to go home. The war is over, and they won't miss it. But I will. This has been the best damned adventure a man could ask for.
George, you mad bastard. We never would have gotten here without you. And your men.
The Third Army and a son of a goddamn bitch named George Patton. Serving with you has been an honor, Ike. A hell of an honor.
This is a solemn but a glorious hour. I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe. Much remains to be done. The victory won in the West must now be won in the East. The whole world must be cleansed of the evil from which half the world has been freed.
I assume you've heard about the Polish situation, Mr. President.
Of course. The democratic election Stalin promised us was a joke. Poland is now another one of Stalin's puppet states.
Indeed. And all the while, Soviet forces in Eastern Germany continue to grow.
We should respond in kind. A buildup of our troops in West Europe will deter the Soviets.
This isn't the first time Stalin has reneged on a promise. Matching his threats won't be enough. We must prepare for full-scale Soviet aggression.
That's an entirely different beast from the one we just tackled.
Perhaps Sir Harold Alexander could be of help. I understand your cooperation with him was fruitful?
Perhaps. We could certainly use his strategic acumen.
And his discretion. Our plans for the defense of Europe must be made in absolute secrecy.
The damn communists have stolen the plans to the Manhattan Project. Not all of it, but they'll get started on their own atomic bomb now, surely.
And to think you were so worried about Manhattan security that you removed the British from the project. Now our enemies have the atomic bomb, and your allies do not.
Fortunately, the Russians will need a few years to create a working weapon.
Let's hope so. But MI6 has intercepted Soviet communications. Stalin plans to invade Western Europe.
Jesus H. Christ, another world war. With the previous one barely over. The voters will eat me alive.
But we British can't hold the Soviets on our own. Do you really want to hand the industrial might of all Europe into communist hands?
In that case, this one better not take us another 4 years. I will order General Eisenhower to begin the operation.
The aptly dubbed Operation Unthinkable involves a two-pronged offensive through Central Europe. I still can't believe we're fighting our former allies against Hitler.
You've seen the secret reports. We all did. The Soviets are too much of a threat, and defeating them will be no small feat.
Well, if anyone can pull that off, it is our command team. Montgomery, you will march on Berlin from the north. Suppress any resistance.
And so I'll have Berlin on my record after all. Better late than never.
Bradley, your forces advance upon Berlin from the south.
Affirmative. Too bad Patton is no longer with us. He dreamt of beating the Red Army.
I'll miss the old chap. George and I had our differences, but these meetings are a dull affair without him.
Gentlemen, our objective is a swift, clean victory. Remember, we fight for freedom.
After months of bitter fighting, Germany is free of oppressors from within and without. The treacherous Red Army has been thrown back to the eastern steppes they came from. This victory proves there is no place for tyranny in Europe. This wasn't simply a clash of two armies, but a clash of ideals. Under Joseph Stalin's cruel regime, no amount of casualties was unacceptable. His fanatic soldiers fought to the last. But today, the entire free world cheers the triumph of liberty over slavery and oppression.
At long last, Germany is free. A year later than it could have been.
What are you saying, General?
Just wondering if this war could have been avoided if I let Monty take Berlin back in 1945.
Perhaps, but perhaps not.
If we had taken Berlin, we would have had a solid foothold in Germany. But we would have confronted the Soviets too early, with our resources depleted.
True. I was worried about the Soviets' reaction back then. Montgomery has told me more than once that I think too much about politics.
A strength, and not a weakness, I would say. I know no other man who could make the British and the Americans work together so well.
Thank you, Sir Harold. I suppose I could play the mediator a bit longer. The war on fascism was just Act 1. Now we're taking on the communists.
Mr. Stalin is now our unbridled enemy. We are past the point of no return. We must retake Poland from the Soviets.
Liberate Poland, Sir Winston. We don't need a colony there. We need a democratic government acting as our ally. Hopefully once Poland is free, Stalin will agree to talk.
Remember 1938. Dictators only respect overwhelming force. Only by killing the Soviet beast can we bring Europe freedom.
Christ. The American public won't stand for another mobilization.
Mr. President, communicate this to your public. They can either face the USSR today or an entire Red Continent tomorrow.
Let us finish up in Poland first. Then we'll plan further. That's all I can tell you now.
Gentlemen, we have our orders. The offensive into Poland will proceed. President Truman thinks that if we crush the Russian army, we can force the Kremlin to negotiate.
And Prime Minister Churchill believes this will only anger them further.
Either way, our orders are clear. We attack. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
We must advance decisively, even into Soviet territory, and use mobile warfare to keep the Reds from setting up fortified defenses.
No. We must clear Poland carefully and then dig in ourselves. Advancing into the Soviet Union would break the two main rules of warfare. Never march on Moscow, and never start a land war in Asia.
I've never heard of those rules.
That's because nobody had thought of them before. I invented them.
Unbelievable.
Gentlemen, I heard you. And I'll think of our next steps. Right now we have the battle to win. Poland must be liberated.
Soldiers, welcome to the Army of the Reborn Poland. Our homeland is finally free from tyrants, but we aren't safe yet. Not until we march east and defeat the Red Menace once and for all. Poland is not yet dead, but Comrade Stalin soon will be.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Poland is free, and the Poles are enlisting en masse to fight the Russians. Still, President Truman is trying to negotiate with Stalin. He says we must wait for a reply.
I doubt the Soviets will talk. They've withdrawn from Poland and are regrouping. They clearly plan to keep fighting.
And if we sit and do nothing, they could kick us back all the way to the Atlantic.
I believe you're right. Let us hope we get an answer soon. Reds refuse to talk, but we can't possibly hope to liberate the whole USSR with our present forces.
But Ike, why should we waste our troops when we have the atomic bomb? The demoralizing effect of it...
Now hold on a minute. Thousands of innocent people will die. Tens of thousands.
Well said. We come to liberate those people, not incinerate them.
Yes, but this isn't the same Soviet Union Hitler invaded back in '41. Hell, even if we defeat the USSR, we can't occupy it.
We won't have to, if we find ourselves an ally among the local elites and put him in Moscow.
I have no doubt the British Secret Service could locate such a person.
To put our man in Moscow, you must reach it first. The Soviet landscape is a goddamn disaster.
In that case, let's involve the foreign experts. We could contact Franz Halder, the former Wehrmacht general with a relatively clean reputation. He came up with the Blitzkrieg once. Now he can help us account for its mistakes.
I like it. But keep your talks with this Halder fellow confidential. If the word gets out about an ex-Nazi helping America invade Russia, I'll get strung up in Congress.
Gentlemen, we will hit the enemy from all sides. Field Marshal Montgomery, General Bradley, you will lead our main offensive through the Ukraine and Belarusia.
Understood.
Looks like we'll have our hands full.
No one ever promised you this would be easy. But if you win today, the road to Moscow will be open, and the end of this will finally be in sight. Gentlemen, Godspeed.
The Russians have to be hard at work making their own atomic bomb. We need to win this war before they drop one on us.
We must keep a cool head. I'm sure our forces will take Moscow before the Russians develop a working device.
Not at the current pace. Ukraine must have plenty of scenic routes, since Field Marshal Montgomery seems to be taking them all.
If I know anything at all about Sir Bernard, there must be good reasons for the delay.
A preventive atomic bombing could end this in short order.
One cannot build freedom and democracy on a bed of radioactive ash. We must trust in our democratic army, not our bombs. Now is not the time to lose our nerve.
And yet there are now more Americans fighting in Europe than the entire Commonwealth. If the British keep dragging their feet, America might be forced to take the initiative.
Take the initiative and do what? Pray tell.
Gentlemen, I found our man to lead Russia, Georgy Zhukov. The Soviet Marshal of Victory and a good friend of mine, Zhukov fell into disfavor after the war's end, and was made a glorified lawman in Odessa.
Recently, Zhukov has been reinstated as a commander against us. Looks like Mr. Stalin wants Georgy to pull his foot out of the fire twice.
We must convince Georgy that, unlike Joe Stalin, we keep our given word. He is no fool, and he might just switch sides. The people love him. If he defects, who knows how many Red Army units might join him?
Have you managed to contact him?
No. Zhukov is leading the defense of Kiev and refuses to negotiate. Therefore, our only chance to have a talk with him is to take him alive.
This battle will be tricky enough without having to kidnap a Soviet field marshal. We need more time to prepare.
We've only got until mid-autumn at best, before the weather turns most of the roads into sludge. For once, Montgomery, you'll have to pick up the pace.
Everything I do is to ensure good men don't get killed needlessly. And rushing onto a fortified city like Kiev is a slaughter in the making.
I understand your concern. By God, I do. But either we grab Zhukov and get him on our side, or we will have to fight for every inch of Soviet soil. It could take decades. Imagine how many good men will die then. You are finally here. Good. We have much to discuss, Mr. Zhukov.
General Eisenhower, I hear your negotiations with Marshal Zhukov went well.
He has agreed to cooperate and brought dozens of Red Army divisions to our side.
And what does he want in exchange?
Our full support. He wants Moscow taken, Bolsheviks fully deposed, and democratic elections held. He thinks he can win them fair and square.
Excellent. America will keep its end of the bargain. I want you to keep advancing and take Moscow as soon as you can.
With respect, Mr. President, attacking Moscow with winter just around the corner is madness.
Napoleon and Hitler learned it the hard way. I assure you the third time will not be the charm.
Then we must take Moscow before winter. That gives you a couple of months. I suggest you get moving.
Moscow is a stronghold. We'll have better odds if we dig in and continue the offensive in spring.
You expect me to keep millions of American soldiers in trenches in Russia for an entire winter? The voters will crucify me. Eisenhower, by the end of autumn, we're in Moscow. Is that clear?
Understood, Mr. President. I will inform my staff. I was flying over Europe a few days ago and I saw the strangest thing.
Do tell.
There were no shell craters. No burned vehicles. No columns upon columns of marching men. The war is over. The world is free from tyranny at last.
Still, it's a fragile peace. Europe is awash with weapons, millions have been displaced, and the former Soviet Union is full of stragglers. President Zhukov will have his hands full.
Indeed. We've won the peace, now we must keep it. Field Marshal Alexander, I would like to offer you a new position, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces in the former USSR. Would you agree to stay in the East for a little longer?
It would be an honor. There's still much to do here, and it is unlike a gentleman to leave a job half-finished.
Yes. The victory came so fast we are still scrambling. And maybe it didn't have to be that way. It turns out President Truman has misinformed me. The Russians were years away from getting an atomic bomb. Looks like he used the Russian nuclear threat to spur us all on, and win votes at home.
So there was no need for that haste. If our offensive got bogged down, I shudder to think of the consequences. Thank God we won.
We won in Europe, but now it seems I must turn my attention to the home front. Truman has a 2-term limit. The American people deserve a worthy president.
General, are you thinking about running for office?
I will certainly try.